Destiny 3 is always something I see discussed a lot. It's one of the most polarizing topics in Destiny, and I'm sure this video will have mixed opinions, but pretty much every time Bungie removes stuff, it pops back up and people debate why Bungie haven't made it yet. In fact, Destiny 3 was even trending on Twitter out of nowhere after Bungie announced they'd be vaulting the Forsaken content. It was pretty much half the people questioning why Bungie haven't made Destiny 3, and the other half arguing with them why it shouldn't happen and why they should stop asking. I mean, up until a few years ago, Bungie was actually making Destiny 3. In fact, if you go even further back, they had planned to make a Destiny 4 as well. But why they actually changed their mind over the years, I think is the important part a lot of people don't fully know about. So I thought it would make an interesting video to discuss what actually happened there and some of the financial and behind the scenes factors that people often overlook, and sort of put the topic of Destiny 3 to bed once and for all now that we know the full story. I see a lot of speculation over what this Beyond section means after the final Shape expansion, and that ties into what we're going to talk about in this video too, because I do think it's slightly possible we will see some kind of new Destiny release way down the line, and I mean way down, but I still don't think it would be a Destiny 3, and I'll explain why. Now, to be clear, I do fully get why people really want Bungie to make a Destiny 3. There are a lot of people that simply want a fresh start, a clean slate, and a new entry point in the game, and there are many valid reasons why it would be a good idea, which we'll talk about. But there are also a lot of reasons why it can't happen, especially the way that players would want it. I think it's easy for us non-developers to speculate, but as we'll get into, things behind the scenes are always a lot more complicated. I want to give a quick thank you to our video sponsor, NordVPN. VPNs hide your IP address, making you untraceable and basically let you pretend to be in any country you want. I'll let you in on a clever secret, but when there's a Bungie bounty going on, a lot of people use VPNs to match into lobbies where the bounty target is. Obviously, you're more likely to match players in the same country, but that's how a lot of people get the emblem. They group up on people who have a VPN. So for gaming, a VPN gives you a lot more matchmaking control, and of course it also protects you from DDoS attacks across any game on any platform. Beyond gaming, VPNs also let you bypass region locks on any site. I'm sure you've seen the message, this content isn't available in your country. All the streaming sites like Netflix, they actually have different libraries based on your region because of licensing. So with a VPN, you can just hop around to any country and see films and TV shows, sports or anime or anything that you didn't know was available in other countries. So if you click the link in the description or the top comment, nordvpn.com/unknownplayer, you'll get a special holiday deal, which is a big discount off a 2-year plan with an additional free month on top. And they also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's really no risk in at least trying it. So thanks again for NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Let's get into it. So after the release of Destiny 2 in 2017, Bungie had started work on Destiny 3, as they were of course contractually obliged to under Activision, their publisher. The relationship between Bungie and Activision could probably be its own video. It was very complicated, but under the original contract between the two companies, before Destiny was even called Destiny, it was called Project Tiger. And as you can see, there are actually planned to be 4 games released, as in Destiny 1 in 2013, Destiny 2 in 2015, 3 in 2017, and Destiny 4 in 2019. Obviously, this was a very ambitious plan that went absolutely nowhere to schedule, and things ended up being very different to this, but this, as you can see, was the original plan, a very franchise-similar model to Call of Duty, where you release big games, except for Destiny it was every 2 years. The Forsaken expansion was a big turning point for Bungie. It's when they started to realize that delivering a game like Destiny 3 might not be viable. Activision famously said they were disappointed in how Forsaken performed, which of course was mainly financially, and it showed the main differences between the two companies, that it really wasn't going to work long term. It was soon after this that Bungie and Activision of course parted ways, with Bungie owning entirely the Destiny franchise, and it was now their decision whether they wanted to continue with Destiny 2 and make it this ongoing game, or make a Destiny 3 and risk losing all the progress they had made with Destiny 2 so far. Of course, we now know what decision they ended up making, and it was leaked that for Destiny 3 they were working on things like making it more RPG focused. Guardians would be using the Darkness and Europa being a location, and obviously that turned into be Beyond Light. And now what we're seeing with Witch Queen, Lightfall and Final Shape are the remnants of what Bungie wanted to do with Destiny 3, but of course put into Destiny 2. So Bungie right now is making Destiny 2 into this kind of giant kind of hub, this best of the entire franchise. They've taken obviously a lot of content from Destiny 1, trimmed a lot of fat from Destiny 2, and taken the new stuff they were working on with Destiny 3 and making this one kind of conglomerate in the shell of Destiny 2. We've seen them remove entire planets, multiple of them, remove entire campaigns and story content. They finally added a 4th element of stasis, which was very big as far as Destiny goes, and also things like the events, the Almighty event and the Traveler healing itself. These are things we never thought were possible back in Destiny 1, but currently it's very possible to just kind of add and remove as they please. Obviously, some players don't agree with a lot of it, but as far as game development goes, it is a very efficient process for them. If you think about how often you go and play Destiny 1 right now, it would end up being very similar for Destiny 2, except probably even less, as there's less of a nostalgia effect there. It would just be this kind of empty, abandoned game that no one would really play, and again would be a massive server cost and kind of waste of resources for Bungie. Now, another reason why Bungie would have decided against making a third game would of course be the development time. This is something I see a lot of people don't often take into account, but the amount of time it takes to develop a full AAA game to the quality that people would expect is actually significant. Bungie released Halo Reach in 2010 and then went completely dark, releasing nothing until 2014 when Destiny 1 released, and even then it was a year delayed, but we're talking 3 to 4 years minimum of zero content for the current game, with no expansions and probably very little, if any, seasonal content. Even if you look at those 3 years in between Destiny 1 and 2, Bungie was stretched so thin, and there were still huge complaints that Destiny 1 didn't launch with enough content, didn't get enough post-launch support, and then Destiny 2, of course, as we know, got similar complaints. But as we've seen, supporting an existing game that needs a lot of attention while also developing a brand new sequel with a ton of expectations to be new is basically an impossible task. Something would have to give, and Bungie would have to drop attention on one of their games. A very interesting example of this is actually happening right now with Overwatch. I've seen a lot of people saying recently that Overwatch is doing what Destiny would have done if they decided to make a third game, but they've been working on Overwatch 2 for a while now and they stopped supporting the first game, and a lot of people saying the player base is shrinking without new players and new maps and new content basically. So it's always a big risk to basically starve out the current game that exists and your player base is loving, and you need to hope that this sequel is going to be really, really good and worth that massive gap in content that I talked about that does need to happen if you want to make a game that meets players' expectations. But as I said, it's not really viable to be working on multiple games like that, and something always has to give. There is actually a very interesting article that Bungie wrote back in 2020. I think a lot of people missed or forgot about it in the announcements, but this, I believe, is the only time in history Bungie have ever actually talked about Destiny 3 and even called it that by name, but they were always very careful with their words. But this post, written by Deej at the time, is the first and probably only time Bungie will ever talk about it. This was in reference to the Destiny content vault, and they were explaining how with Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, they made quite a big mistake and they fractured the community, reset players' progress, and set the player experience back in ways that took them a year to recover from. He said this is a mistake they don't want to repeat again by making Destiny 3, and that's why they've been putting all their effort into Destiny 2, which is going to continue to evolve. As I said, Bungie have always avoided even mentioning the name Destiny 3, but for anyone still unsure, they did put it in writing in this post, officially saying they are not going to make it and continuing with Destiny 2 is their plan. As I'm sure you've noticed, the games industry has changed quite a lot since Destiny's conception in 2010. Of course, microtransactions are basically king right now. The amount of effort it takes to make entirely new locations, sound design and voice acting, modeling and testing, and then the promotion for all that, versus making a couple new skins or a couple animations or emotes, it's basically not comparable, except the money is very much comparable. I mean, you can go on the Eververse store and buy a couple items that probably equates to the same value price-wise as an entire season, or buy a few more and it might equate to the same price as an expansion or the entire price of Destiny 2 at launch. But the money isn't something that Bungie would have mentioned in their blog post, but of course it would be a massive deciding factor, something a ton of accountants would have had many meetings to discuss and try and project, is this financially viable? And of course, it is important to remember that Bungie is not a charity, they're a business, they are trying to make money as well as making cool games. So when we talk about reasons why they didn't make a third game, money is definitely going to be a big factor here. Now, as well as the financial numbers, Bungie is also proving to keep very healthy player-based numbers. So as well as making tons of cash, they are keeping a lot of people playing. Now, of course, the quality of how much they're enjoying it and how many players are new versus old is up for debate, but there are still a significant amount of people playing the game. Despite having its expansions delayed and Witch Queen being pushed back and then 6-month seasons, it's still managing to compete with some of the biggest games in the world right now and topping the Steam charts. Now, as much as these things might be true, there are still some major downsides to them not making a Destiny 3. And of course, they would have weighed these up, but there are a lot of players who simply won't be coming back. I see the comments all the time of people saying, I'll come back when there's Destiny 3, or I'm not going to come back unless they make one. But a lot of people simply put did just want a new fresh start, and they don't mind starting over again with a brand new game. I've talked to so many people, whether they're content creators or casual gamers, that have said that they would love to get into Destiny 2, but they're kind of too intimidated by it, and it seems like it's already been too far gone, and they wouldn't know what they're doing if they were to jump in right now. I'm sure you guys also know a lot of similar people that are kind of on the outskirts that consider playing Destiny, but they're just too intimidated to get into a game that's been going on for so long. And it's kind of part of the reason why I don't play a game like Warframe, for example. I know a lot of you might hate me for saying that, but it just seems like it's been going on for so long. I kind of feel like I'm very behind and I wouldn't know what I'm doing if I was to jump in right now. And that's exactly what people describe Destiny 2 as. As far as the starting over again and losing your progress debate, this is something that people just fall into one of two camps on and never really going to agree. But I personally, and let me know what you think in the comments, but I never really minded losing all my progress from Destiny 1 into Destiny 2. I was always saying way back in the day that I don't want to be using the same guns in Destiny 2 and I want to use all new stuff in an all new game. Personally, for me, I've always enjoyed just a brand new clean start and everything is new and everyone's kind of on the same level playing field. But again, it's not something everyone is going to agree on. People always have different opinions, but I think the interesting thing is that this kind of happened one way or another slowly in Destiny 2. You just didn't really notice it because it was a very slow process. If you try and look through your vaults for anything that existed back in 2017, you're probably not going to find much and definitely nothing that you're using right now. It was just a very gradual process because of sunsetting and kind of phasing things out season by season. You still end up with a similar result. It just happens a lot more gradually over a long period of time, and with everything being deleted or you being encouraged to delete stuff. So if Bungie were to make a Destiny 3, at least the content in Destiny 2 would be relatively the same. It wouldn't be playable and it would be kind of a waste of resources, but at least it would still be there and it would still exist in its current state. But right now, as I covered in a recent video, the game is basically being overwritten and Destiny 2 is being erased for this new kind of combination of all three games. So my point with this is that essentially there is no way to avoid getting rid of old content, whether it gets slowly overwritten or just completely left and is no longer relevant. Either way, you're always gonna have to make way for new content. Games need new stuff and you can't just infinitely build on existing massive pool of content. Something has to go. They're just two different ways of achieving pretty much the same process. Now, as far as the future of Destiny, we know that Bungie, of course, is going to be wrapping up the entire Light versus Dark story and saga with the final shape. Now, that was basically the story they've been telling since Destiny 1, Traveler versus the Darkness, and this is all going to come to an end in final shape. And then after that, there isn't really going to be any more story to tell. Now, I'm sure they're going to do more expansions and kind of delve into separate pockets of the universe, but after final shape, there isn't really going to be any more enemies unless they just make something up, which wouldn't really make any sense, and I'm sure they won't do. There isn't really going to be any major plot points that would justify making a Destiny 3, seeing as it's all going to be wrapped up after final shape. Now, the only way that I do see Bungie could make an entirely new Destiny game, but it wouldn't be called Destiny 3, would be some kind of prequel. I do think it's very possible we could see a game set in so many different areas of the vast universe of Destiny. It could be a prequel, could be a spin-off. Like I said, the Light versus Dark is going to end with final shape, but there's so many more stories you could tell that take place before it, or in kind of an alternate different timeline that we haven't touched on. I think that is more likely to be the direction they would go if they were to make a new game, which again could be a possibility way down the line. Off the top of my head, you can go so many different places. The Golden Age was a massive period of time for Destiny, and so many things happened during it. Then there's also the Dark Age, what happened after the collapse. Again, a lot happened during those times. There's also all the enemies in Destiny, mainly the Hive. They have so much of a backstory. Again, you could easily do some kind of prequel game based in their universe and all the timelines that happened then. With Oryx and his sisters and the worms and pretty much everything in the Book of Sorrows, there is a ton of content there. You got enemies like the Fallen. They, of course, used to be Guardians. They used to be just like us with their Golden Age. You got the Cabal, which are kind of interesting. You've also got things like the Awoken. Their entire storyline is massive. So I think Bungie would definitely go back instead of going forward if they were to make a new Destiny game in this universe, which we know is massive. Now, as well as making, of course, their other game, which is codenamed Matter, we know they're also making massive plans to flesh out the Destiny universe beyond gaming, which is things like movies and books, TV shows, a lot of media, which they talked about when they initially had their split with Activision. But Bungie don't just want to make multiple games, they also want to make multiple forms of media. And again, because the Destiny universe is so massive, there is just so much you can do there, and I think they definitely want to cover that beyond just making video games. So I do want to know your thoughts on everything I've discussed. Like I said, it is a very polarizing topic, but I will be reading all the comments to see where you guys stand on this kind of stuff. If you wouldn't mind pressing the thumbs up button before you go, it would be much appreciated. And of course, subscribe if for whatever reason you are not. I'm grateful you made it this far into listening to me talk for that long. As always, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.